Hi, good evening, and welcome to my channel. Okay, today I want to talk about a few things. Mainly something I actually heard about this about a year ago, and it's been popping up recently, and I actually saw it. Actually, it's a good way to look at investing, especially dividend investing. And it's called the income factory. So there's a gentleman called Stephen Bavaria who invented the term. He invests in high yield stocks and different products that give him a high yield. And basically, how it works is he can actually live off his dividends. That's always the goal, to do that. But even if the dividends replace like a part of your income, um, it can help you in retirement. Okay, so basically so it's called the income factory, and the best way to hold to how the income factory works, let me say, is you buy dividend stocks. What you do is look for dividend yields 5 or 6% or 7%, but also if they can increase the dividend growth, increase 2, 3, or 4%, then that dividend you'll get is a high yielding dividend that will increase in time. Or if you're getting a lower dividend, maybe like a 2% plus minus, then if that dividend can increase at 20% a year, then your dividend will increase over time. And basically the way he's looking at it is hold forever. So in other words, you don't need to sell your dividend stocks. Later on, I'll get into the when you get to retirement age, how it works. So yeah, it's basically a case of holding your dividend stocks, and you don't have to sell unless you really need to. So in other words, it becomes like that's what he calls an income factory. So if you look at like a car factory, let's say a car factory produces 10 cars a year, then that is the income. You could do it with the same with a farm. If a farm sells so many liters of milk per year and whatever, so basically what they're saying is if they produce 1 liter of milk per month for the first year, then they produce 12 liters of milk. But if they produce 2 liters of milk every month, then that doubles. Okay, so this is the way that he basically looks at this. He actually, what he does is he looks at his portfolio. People look at their portfolio values and they see the market's up and down. So the market usually, it's over the long term, it's usually up, but the market does go up, does go down, does go down sometimes for longer periods of time. In other words, if you have a crash or whatever, so the periods of, but a good company will keep the dividend going. So in other words, that's your income stays the same. So most of the times your share prices of your dividend stocks won't decrease as much as, for example, your tech stocks or whatever, because of the dividend. So in other words, you'll still get your dividend every quarter. Often they will still increase that dividend. Even in down markets, you're still getting your dividend. So this is what he's working out. The portfolio is more stable, and you don't have the big ups and downs, and it gives you more incentive to just buy and hold and enjoy your income. You can reinvest your dividends over time. So you can reinvest your dividends to buy more, and then what they call a total return. So in other words, you get your return on your stock. In other words, if your stock appreciates or depreciates, and then you get your dividend return. So if if a stock, for example, goes up 9% and it's got a 1% dividend yield, and so that's a total return of 10%. If it goes up 10% and it's got a zero dividend yield, so it doesn't pay a dividend, then it's also 10%. But if it's got a 6% dividend yield and it goes up 4%, then you're still getting a 10% return. And you can, like I say, reinvest the dividends. So in other words, when you get the dividends, you can reinvest it. You've got a thing called a drip, which is you can actually do an automatic reinvestment, which is something good to take advantage of. But obviously, when you get to retirement age, then you can change that. So okay, so your compounding then will work over time with your dividend portfolio. So you're getting the dividends, obviously reinvesting it, and getting then higher returns. Then you buy more shares of that company, and then with the next dividend, then you've got more shares to pay out on. So in other words, when they increase the dividend on that, so you're getting a dividend increase and you're getting more shares so your dividend payout should go up every year, every quarter. You should be seeing a higher rate of dividends. So over time, over 10 years, you should see a huge increase in the dividend. So your dividend growth works the same as your share price growth, your CAGR. You can work it out. You can use the rule of 72 to work out how much you will get. And so you